AM radio.
Good morning.
Morning.
Supervisor Williams, are you still with us?
I'm still with you.
All right. Good morning. Everybody is here. Supervisor Williams is with us via phone. I want to welcome everybody to the January 18th Board of Supervisors meeting. Let's begin the meeting with a prayer this morning. Supervisor Howard, will you lead us in prayer, please?
Sure. Would you bow your heads, please? This morning, our Heavenly Father, we come just telling you thank you. Thank you for all the many blessings that you bestowed upon us. Heavenly Father, we pray that the decisions that we make today will be pleasing in your sight and beneficial for the people of Oktibbeha County. Heavenly Father, as always, we pray for our military soldiers that stand abroad for our freedom. Heavenly Father, we pray for all of the homes that's represented here today. We pray that you will shower and protect them. Heavenly Father, we pray that in your name that everything be done decently and in order. Pray for the leaders on the national level, on the state level, and on the local level. These and other blessings we ask in your Son Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we're now going to open the floor for citizen comment periods. This is a time where any citizen can stand up and give their comment. They have 3 minutes. Is there anybody in the room that would like to make a comment or statement? If not, we'll move forward. The next items on the agenda all pertain to the county lake. Is there anybody here from Pickering or Mississippi Engineering Group? I'm sorry, okay. And who are you?
Yes, I'm Bill McDonald. I represent Mississippi Engineering Group.
Okay. Well, Mr. McDonald, we want to welcome you to our meeting today, where we are discussing the ongoing investigation of the county dam. The board received the Geotechnological exploration and analysis of Pebble County Lake Dam. This report and review, I trust the board has had a chance to review that. We did get it a couple of weeks ago. We were pleased to see some of the paragraphs in it. Looked very good for the taxpayers. Like in section 5.3, the dam was considered safe as terms of seepage. Also that the 1979 report and your inspection by the U.S. County engineers, that it pointed out that the lakes downstream and the lakeside and downstream
Sir, could you
were
come
too
on up,
steep.
please, so you can address the board?
Let
him.
I was just introducing you.
Yeah,
Sorry.
well, I mean,
Was to emphasize that we need to flatten those. So we're glad to have you. Thank you.
Well, like I said, my name is Bill McDonald. I'm an engineer, and I'm with Mississippi Engineering Group. And as you're aware, you just sort of summarized, you contracted with us a few months ago to do an analysis of the dam. And that included a geotech evaluation, some
Barnes Cooley Dennis.
Right, Barnes Cooley Dennis. We subcontracted them to do those geotechnical analyses, do some selected borings. And they, by the way, did that in collaboration with or under the review of Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality, just to make sure that the information that we were going to gather was going to be what DEQ wanted to see. The types of borings and evaluations that they wanted to see, so that we wouldn't have to go back and do something again.
It was an excellent report.
So that was the first step. The second thing in our scope that you contracted us to do was the hydrologic and hydraulic analysis, and that's basically looking at the capacity of the spillway and the dam structure itself to pass floods of, the statistical floods of analysis, which in this case are prescribed to be what's called a probable maximum flood based on the probable maximum precipitation. And that's basically, what's the most rainfall we could expect statistically to occur, and you sort of take it to the worst possible scenario and see if that will, if the existing structures will pass that flood. And then a sort of related to that is the dam inundation analysis, and you've done these things before, and so our scope was to update that inundation, and that's basically where you just consider the you just pass the entire flood, consider a dam failure, you pass the flood, and then map the footprint of that flood to see what it would impact. So that's the third thing. And then the fourth thing is any improvements based on the geotech analysis, the hydraulic analysis, capacity analysis, and these other evaluations. What are the recommended improvements that we would suggest to the dam? And then obviously the $1 million question everyone has: how much is it going to cost? So the final thing is putting together the opinions and costs for all of those improvements. So all of that would then be wrapped up into a final report. And so we've performed all of these analyses, and now we're putting that report together, and we'll have that report done before the end of the month. And our suggestion to you is that we would review that report, pardon me, that draft report with DEQ, Mr. McKercher and his staff, to make sure that it has satisfied their requirements and their parameters for the things that need to be evaluated. And concurrent with that, we would suggest that we review that with you sort of on a one-on-one or two-on-two basis, just to give you the opportunity to see that, ask questions, so you know what's coming before we present it formally and put it in the record. And we would suggest that we do all that, between now and the next board meeting, I guess, sometime the first week or so of February.
Could you share with the board what your level, what type? There's a lot of different engineers on here.
Right.
So what's your specialty on here? There's about 30 people listed on the contract.
Yeah. I personally am I'm a general civil engineer. I've been in practice for about 30 years, and most of my work is in the public works arena, civil, transportation, utility engineering. I'm not a structural engineer. I'm not a geotechnical engineer, and that's why we have partners like Burns Cooley Dennis who specialize in geotechnical evaluations.
Yes, sir. Okay. Supervisor Howard, I'm sorry I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay, Supervisor Miller. My name is Marvell Howard.
Yes, sir.
Represent District 3. The County Lake actually sits in my district, and I'm probably the closest living resident to that dam. I live right down behind the dam, and I'm not looking for one little statement taken out of context on your report about the dam is safe.
Right.
That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the overall report, the overall suggestions, the overall analysis, the information to bring to us in conjunction with making sure that you're working with MDEQ, supplying them with what their needs are. The report you gave us is detailed. It's a great detailed report, and I think you've made some suggestions, some analysis in there about some things that need to take place. So your next step then will be to actually finish that. You still got some data left to compile and analyze? That's
right. That report, the report you're referring to, is the geotechnical report that summarizes the borings that were made, the purpose for those borings, the things that they looked at, and the conclusions that were drawn from those borings. So that was strictly to do with the soil, the structure of the dam itself, the underlying soils, the embankment soils, the up and downstream toes, of the potential for instability in those soils, or the potential for seepage under or through that dam. So all of those kinds of things, the soils and the structure of the embankment are the things that were evaluated there. So that's what. So I think the statement you're referring to when you said the dam is safe, quote, there was a statement saying as far as the potential for seepage through the dam or under the dam, that the geotechnical engineer concluded that it was safe from that respect. To your other point, yes, there are other things, the hydraulic capacity, the hydraulic capacity of the spillway to pass the flood, the statistical flood, that's another factor that has to be considered when if you want to call it safe or sufficient or adequate or whatever. So yes, we have completed those analyses, and we're now putting all of that into a final report along with our opinions of cost to remediate any of those deficiencies. And that's what I'm saying, we'll get that report drafted before the end of the month, and then we would suggest to sit down and go through it with each of you, give you the opportunity, just like this, to ask questions, to make sure you absorb it. And then and do the same thing with DEQ to make sure DEQ understands and concurs with the level of investigations that were accomplished. And then that would conclude that task.
There was a couple, well, that one question in particular, or one observation, and I can't remember the exact wording, but it sounded like at all of your boring sites that the dam was solid, except for, then it went on with an exception at borings 11 and 7, I think it was, that there would seem to be more moisture, softness in that core. Do you remember that particular?
You've read that. I commend you for having read that report and understood the details. I know what you're referring to. I mean, I recall. I better not comment, because
Okay.
I'll misspeak
Okay.
on behalf of the geotechnical engineer. But yeah, that's exactly what the purpose of those borings was to do, was to look. I mean, that dam is what, 4,000 feet long or so. So you've got to take representative samples along the entire, length. You can't just extrapolate from one to the other, because things are going to change. So, to your point, for the most part, as I recall, the report said that the embankment soils were stiff, strong, the kinds of soils you would want for to form an effectively impermeable barrier. But there are some isolated, maybe soft or moist spots. So that's exactly what that's intended to find. So,
yeah, it says that some portions of the embankment are susceptible to strength reduction due to weathering. So what I saw in there's some slopes that have fallen off that are too steep, that have, washed back, washed out, and that what I'm seeing is there's portions of the embankment that are soft to medium. Some you say are hard, and it was referring to some of the different, the different borings. What I take from it is there's places that you're gonna have to dig out and pack back in, and then you're talking about a plating of
it's just
a covering that will mesh to the existing ground.
Just stronger soil, yes. That's the primary, as I recall, the primary conclusion of the report is that the geotechnical engineers recommending some plating or strengthening of the surface of the embankment, and then laying back the slopes particularly on the upstream side, so that they're a little flatter.
Okay.
To help strengthen the embankment itself, and then plating, and maybe even putting some rock to abate erosion and wave action and that kind of thing.
Like the riprap that we
Right,
put in
that's right.
2016.
Well, there's erosion up underneath that 2016 repair too.
Yeah.
So, in layman's terms, what I gather is, and the core drives everything, and that's the base, that's the foundation, that's what you build off of. And in layman terms, I'm understanding that you can, I guess, confidently say 90% of that core is in good shape. But there's that little bit percentage that's questionable.
I think the conclusion is the core is a solid core. It's but you got to make sure your surface in the surface of the embankments are strong and stable, and if they have eroded, that they get repaired and they get replaced, like you've done in the past with some isolated.
So you can't
locations.
just depend, and what I'm getting at is, even if you've got a good core, the slopage has to be right, hydraulics has to work.
That's right.
As according
You have to
to,
protect your slopes, right?
in order to classify this as a safe
That's right.
dam, especially since it's
Right.
what's the term for
High
when
hazard.
people, high hazard dam?
And that's why we want to make
But
sure.
high hazard has to do with how many people live behind it, right?
It has
I mean,
to do
that
with the
doesn't
si-
have,
and
I mean,
I-
it doesn't, high hazard is a word that's a scary word, but that's
sounds-
what
that's
that.
right, that's right.
But it doesn't mean that high hazard mean that it's going to break, it means that it's the amount of people behind it. It's always gonna be a high hazard even when we correct the.
Right, and I'm
right.
going to defer to Mr. McKercher if you wish to hear from him on that, because that's his business.
Okay,
But yes, you're right. High hazard, it sounds, scary. That's a classification not based on some threat of necessarily an imminent failure. It's based on the type, the size, the potential impact downstream, that kind of thing. And so because it's classified that way, then there are extraordinary things that you must do from time to time, as far as inspection, review, and improvement, remediation, that kind of thing, to make sure it remains,
Well,
in a safe condition.
I wasn't referring to it being a high hazard dam
Right.
in order to scare anybody,
Right.
but the fact of the matter is, it is a high hazard dam.
right.
That means if one person is living down behind it and the possibility of the loss of a life
Right.
in case it breaks, makes that a high hazard dam. Yeah.
I wanted to follow up on a couple of things that you said. You were talking about the hydraulic analysis but you're talking about actually when it's a full pool right now. Right now it's so low.
Right.
And even the lake above it is basically empty, that feeds in, I guess, to that one. But it's so low that it's not close to even the riser right now.
Well,
And when you're
but
talking
before you
about-
make that statement, you probably need to ride out and look at it now, since we had this rain. Because it has risen just about back up to the riser.
Okay. My question was about the hydraulics, and you were talking about the hydraulics. You're talking about your assessment is based off of when you think the water level is to full pull, right?
We're talking about under operating conditions. Once it's
Not now because
right.
it's
Once
right.
it's repaired, restored to operating condition, that you want to make sure that it's capable of passing certain amounts of flow. And so
Yes,
they're
sir.
right. That's right.
Okay, thank you.
So that's really what I was here to do, just to give you an update, let you know what's coming, what the next steps are, and what we'd ask. And what we'd ask is that, when we do submit that draft, is that we have the opportunity to go through that with each of you, or however you would like to do that, but make sure you have the opportunity to ask.
Talking about the flow, do you, when we cut that riser off, is there a way to quantify where we're at now as far as flow? In other words, does that satisfy? I know with the DEQ that they were saying that the way that the riser was, it wasn't allowing enough flow. That's why we had to pump water and whatnot out. And then we cut that off, and it increased the flow through that spillway. But is there a way to quantify that once it's, or just by the opening, is there a way to quantify how much this water is going to come through? Is that going to satisfy flow requirements?
There is, sure. I mean, that's basically a hydraulic, calculation or
Right.
analysis.
But is there, y'all can do that as
Yes.
well? Okay.
I guess my understanding though, it won't increase the flow, it'll just start to flow earlier. We didn't change the size of the outlet. We just cut it off so that
Just
it
lowered
will
the-
start to
Flow lower.
flow
At a
quicker.
lower depth.
Lower
Yeah.
the level of, right.
Yeah, it won't increase the flow, but it'll start to flow earlier, by cutting off the risers, is what we.
Right.
Rob?
I have two questions. My first question is, it's more of a timing issue, and I'm gonna ask that question first. I have a certain amount of time that this needs to be dealt with. I've got MDEQ that has the expectation that we get something done, and typically our timing for getting something done is gonna be the summertime, spring, summertime. Whenever you get into the wets, you're an engineer, you know far better than I do. But when we get into that wet season, we're not gonna be able to move forward with that. I have yet to hear anything about when, and which brings me to my second question, when do we get to the design phase of this, and can y'all do the design? Because I've heard some remarks that that your group may not be able to do the design work, and we've already paid for the initial, I guess, survey of this.
Plan.
Right, I wanna make certain that we are laid out so that this community is not gonna have to pay for new testing, which pushes this off to timing, which pushes this off for another year for this community to be able to do this. So can you kind of
Sure.
let us know what that issue is?
So the conclusion of the current step is to give you that report that pulls all this together. Concurrent with that, we want to make sure we're in discussions with DEQ so that satisfies their parameters as well, because the next step then is the design. Whatever that report recommends as far as the improvements. And once you adopt that and you and DEQ sort of agree, okay, yeah, DEQ says this will satisfy the requirements for maintaining a high hazard dam, and you say, okay, we're willing to undertake these improvements. The next step is to design that. All right, so we would suggest that be the immediate next step once this report is concluded, reviewed, and accepted. Is we would say, okay, based on this is what it would take to design this. This is the schedule and the scope of that design and the budget for doing that. And we would present that to you in February, just at the immediate next step, so that you could keep the process moving.
So we will be able to use the testing that we currently are getting to be able to move forward with the design work, which will lead to the actual fixing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now, yeah, the borings and the geotech evaluations that were done were not done with final design and construction in view. They were done forensically to analyze the current condition. But yes, they will be usable and for any design. Now some detailed design may require a few more detail or whatever, but what you've done to date is absolutely going to roll into whatever the next step.
This is a natural progression into the
That's
design.
right.
Okay.
Exactly.
May I ask a question? Has your group designed high hazard dams before? Is that something that y'all do a lot of? And I'm just asking, I think that's important to know.
Sure, absolutely. No, that is not typically the kind of thing that we design. No.
So you would not design this, or you would?
We could. I mean, we certainly have the capability and the availability and the willingness, if you choose, to facilitate that. To contract that. And,
so you would subcontract it
and we
with somebody
could,
else?
acquire the necessary, design, detailed design, experts or whoever we need to do that. We can. I guess what I'm saying is we're here to serve you in whatever capacity you choose to use us. But we can walk with you through this process, guide you through it, and facilitate whatever needs to be done. Yeah.
So, and I know Mr. McCurcher's coming up next, but during that design phase, that's when MDEQ would be heavily involved during the design phase of this to make sure that everything is according to the recommendations and the specifications of MDEQ when it comes to designing a high hazard.
That's right, because as a part of that, and again, Mr. McCurcher can speak to this in more detail, but part of that is before proceeding with that and concluding that design is to, based on that proposed design, submit a permit or an application, if you think of it that way, to DEQ to make sure that they will permit that improvement, the proposed construction. So they've got to be in concurrence with whatever you choose to do as far as the design and construction, plan. So yes, it will be in lockstep with DEQ.
And just to sort of swing back around, when the design phase starts, and you've already gathered the data and made the recommendations on what needs to be, what needs to take place out there at the County Lake Dam, whomever is hired to do the design won't have to go back and gather new data, they'll be able to use that data to move through with the design phase of this, correct?
Right.
They won't have to go and do their own data and research. You did mention maybe one or two
Right.
things.
There may be some additional, more detailed at a finer level, but yes, everything that's been done will be able to will be usable
Okay.
in
We just
whatever.
wanna make sure for liability reasons, if a different if a different group is asked to design the project, that they can go back, you know, for liability reasons, and they can use your data, they don't have to produce their own.
They can certainly use ours. There may be, from their point of view, they may say they want to, you know, gather some additional or validate or whatever, but yes, whatever we've done will be usable going forward.
Thank you. Any additional questions from anybody? Maybe hang around after Mr. McCurcher. We're gonna ask him to come up next, from the MDQ, and that way if there's any further discussion, we can bring you back up. We appreciate you, Mr. McDonald. Thank you so much for coming up.
Thank you.
All right, we now have Mr. William McCurcher, MDEQ, Chief of the Dam Safety Operations.
And just so y'all know, he
Director.
drove down this morning to be here. This is not something he typically has to do, but I want to let y'all know that he's trying very hard to get us back on track and get us rolling. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Certainly. So, you know, as mentioned, I came to attend today's meeting to, you know, hear a presentation from Pickering, Mississippi Engineering Group about progress of the project, where things stood in terms of deliverables, deadlines, and did make, well, I made a few notes during the discussion there that I can cover briefly, and then we can touch on one or two other things. I know you mentioned today about the water level in the lake. You know, it's certainly much higher than it has been. Reason for that, and we noticed during the geotechnical investigation, is you've actually got a tree or a log that's wedged itself in that low level outlet, cut down the amount of flow that's going through that pipe that's kept it drained all the way down. So with that blockage in there now, yeah, your water level is going to come up to where the riser is, because you're not getting the water flow through that pipe that's kept it drained all the way down.
Is that where they piled the trees in there, but the pipe that's underneath the culvert, the riser, is it down up underneath there?
This pipe comes out and it feeds into the riser. So
Okay.
it's about I believe it's a 28-inch diameter pipe. It's got a valve on it, a butterfly valve, which so if you think about it, it's turned, it's centered in the pipe, and so when water's flowing through it, it's gonna go by this way, but then you turn it sideways and it cuts the flow off and impedes that. So because there's that center piece of that valve that's in there, that log is gonna come in and just wedge itself against that valve. So, you know, at some point that may be something that either the county wants to look at having somebody push that out and clear that blockage, or just, you know, move forward and understanding and knowing that option's gone, and you're not going to be able to use that drain anymore to get the water level down for any future work. So certainly want to cover that. And you brought up a question about how the change in flow from the riser being modified.
Yeah.
So in 2019, Pritchard Engineering did do an evaluation of the current existing setup of what were the flow ratings, or how much of the required storm passed through the system with the riser intact, what it was previously. And so before the riser was modified, you're getting about, well, roughly 33% of the amount of water needed to flow through, which really puts you at about not much over 100-year storm, which for this area you're talking about close to about 10 inches of rainfall in a 24-hour time period. So that amount could go through. When the riser was cut down, took that same model that Pritchard put together, showed what would the storage change be with the riser being cut down, and that hope that's not mine. Y'all forgive me if that's the case. Oh, probably so. All right. About
Do you have
2
my
more,
love?
it'll be done. Yeah, sorry. I thought I had them both on silence. The one of the curses of carrying 2 phones all the time.
Tell me that.
But anyway, we went through showing with the riser being cut off and the what we call the normal pool of the lake changing and dropping in elevation. It created enough storage room in the lake itself that it did increase the amount of water that the lake would hold during one of these large rainfall events. And so the change in storage went from around 33 to about 48%. So some of those numbers about what the existing configuration, some of that, historically been done. So that was done 2019. DEQ reviewed all that work. We ran our own models to verify that we concurred with what we got from Pritchard Engineering. So there was originally when we first got those, there was some back and forth about little factors being off here and there, but ultimately we got it to where we were able to agree and accept what was provided because it was concurrent with what the state had from our supporting modeling. So let's see, another note about the design discussion, and just be clear about what MDEQ's level of involvement is when it comes to design plan. The state certainly doesn't dictate what that design has to be. There's lots of ways to go through and put things in place to get that set up. What we would do is we can review what's been proposed. If there's issues with it, we can say, here's our concerns based on the design that's been presented. Here's maybe why we can't accept this, and then it can be modified to get it to a point where we would be able to accept. If it's complete overkill and it does the job, you're shooting a squirrel with an elephant gun, and say this is what was put on the table, maybe a little bit too much, but it works if that's the process you want to use. But again, that it's not for us to dictate how it needs to be done. So
How do we know if it's overkill?
I mean, we would be able to have some discussion about, this is really overboard, but as long as it's enough that it meets the requirements that we're there. Now, part of that verification of the design, and part of why you might know it's overkill, is one of the things that we require with that is, just like the model that shows the way that the current riser is configured and how much water passes there, you would take that same model and you would take out the current spillways that are there and you would put in what your new ones are. So you would say, okay, instead of having the current riser, maybe we change the size of that current riser, make it 3 times as big as what it is right now. And then the emergency spillway, because we know that's undersized, say maybe we take it and we keep it, there was discussion about the original elevation of that. It was built a foot higher than it was supposed to have even been built in the first place. So, okay, it gets dropped down to where it needs to be, and then we widen that out from 120 feet, we take it out to 300 feet. And you would put those, you would just make those size differences, and you would keep running that model until it, each iteration, basically you just whittle those things down until it gets to, till you get the magic number of 100%. So you just keep running those simulations until ultimately you get the answer that you need out of it. So we'll require that when the designs are provided to us, that model is also provided to us, so that we look at that and we double check and make sure that there wasn't an error somewhere in there that may affect, make sure that the right rainfall numbers are being used over the right time periods, and the way that the rainfall is done or distributed, that all comes through and is done according to the process that's consistent with what we have. So really coming in the meeting today, I know one of the questions I've had, I believe has been touched on here, and that was, I guess, with the discussion about the current contract with Pickering and Mississippi Engineering Services, is that it was to go through and do evaluations of what the current structure looks like and have some recommendations for moving forward. And actually, Mr. Howard and I discussed this, forgive me, I don't know if it was last week or week
It was
before.
last week, yeah.
But, we got into, at some point, given that the design is not built into the current contract, that makes things a little, I won't say difficult, but in evaluating who's going to be doing the design work, there's certainly is some concern. I know we brought up about you brought up questions about either redundancy or would a different firm, if somebody else is selected to do the design work, would they need to go through and do their own models? And hopefully I kind of answered some of that with the discussion about the configurations, but certainly Mississippi Engineering Group can put together recommendations, and they can do modeling and say, hey, look, if you do it this way, here's what this is going to look like. When you do have a firm come in that does the design work, if it's Pickering / Mississippi Engineering Group, then certainly they have all that in place, and they'd be able to pick up from there, and whoever they bring on board for doing the design work would be able to modify those. But if you look at having a different firm come in, they would be able to take those models and they could use that work, but at the same time, we've talked about it, if they're putting their professional engineering stamp on it and they're stating that the design and all this is by their specifications, they're going to want to go through and double check all that and make sure that it matches. I think the analogy I use with you is if you were if you were taking your car in to get repaired at the shop, if you go to one shop and you get something from somebody that looks at it and says, well, we think your alternator's starting to go out, you may need to get that fixed, and you leave. If you go back to that shop, they'll do it, and they'll say, we think it was alternator, we're going to start there. If you go to a different shop, and you say, well, the guys down the road told me it's the alternator. Well, they'll say, okay, we'll start looking there, but we're going to need to do our own complete look at this, so that we're comfortable with the findings and make sure that when we do a fix, it's going to actually fix the root problem. And that's certainly not to say that they would be going through and wanting to redo the geotech and all these other evaluations. They'd be able to build off of that, pick up and move forward. It's just knowing that ultimately they'll have they may not want to install the spillways in exactly the same way that the recommendations are done. They may have their own configuration based on their experience of what they think will work, and then they'll tweak the models to reflect and demonstrate that the way that they're going to put on paper works. So at this point, knowing that Mississippi Engineering Group is getting to the point where they'll have a report and they'll have their portions done by the end of the month, I guess really the question will be is, how is the board going to look to address the design aspects? Are you going to be doing, I guess, looking to do an RFQ for engineering services for the design work? So that we kind of know how that conversation works. Sorry. Go ahead.
When we met with you in Jackson, we talked about like list of people that are currently, and cost is something else too for us to try to budget for this to move forward. Mm-hmm. Who's doing the big one in Jackson? Is it? Do you have a list of people that are the reservoir? Aren't in that being redone right now? Is that?
There's some large studies that are being done on actually the potential failure modes analysis and the probable maximum flood that you have that MDQ has requested on this project. We're doing those for Ross Barnett. They've contracted Schnabel Engineering. It's a national firm. I think their closest office was in Georgia, just outside of Atlanta. They've been doing that analysis. Of course, that one's a little bit larger, well, a good bit larger. And so the complexity, won't necessarily be the same. And I think there's also been some question about, really, are we at a point where that failure mode analysis, is that still really necessary? And honestly, a lot of that, I can't necessarily answer that right now, because I think the requirement for having that failure mode analysis comes down to be pretty blunt about it, who's doing the design work for the dam, and do they know enough about high hazard dam design that they know to basically peel back the layers of the onion and look at all of these potential ways that the dam could fail to make sure that new design addresses all of those things versus if you have a firm that's maybe not as experienced with that, probably need to go through that exercise of identifying all those things so that they're clearly listed, so that something isn't missed in the process, and we go through and we do all this, but then we come back 3 years later, 10 years later, and we've got a new problem that's developed on the dam. So depending upon this experience level of who's contracted to come on board to address the design is going to dictate potentially whether or not we still need to do that failure mode analysis.
So we don't know if we need to do a dam failure analysis.
Until we know who you got to kind of wrap all this up, or at least do your design work, then we're really not in position to say that you do or don't necessarily have to have that right now. I know in the order that was discussed, we talked about just having a schedule for doing those things. And of course, there's been discussion about some of the timelines that were proposed and in there. I think all that's up for discussion, but all that hinges upon how the county wants to address getting the firm on that's going to do the final design.
Got a question, and it sort of leads, you sort of touched on it, but I know there are certain marks that the design has to hit,
Right.
To pass MDQ. My question, it might be a question for Pickering too. We're concentrating on the repair of the dam and the county lake, but there's a cause and an effect to everything you do. During this design stage, are there things being taken into consideration as far as the effect downstream? Because when you enlarge the outlet, there's gonna send a ton more water down that stream that carries that water out of that lake. Is it gonna be able to stay in the banks of the outlet that carries that water out? What is it gonna do to the people further downstream? Is all of this being considered during the design stage?
It actually is normally taken into account, that we want to look at how that water passes and how it's held. Honestly, that's part of why you have the two separate spillways, is so that you get that primary that's set at an elevation that you can control what you would say the maximum amount of water that comes out through that primary, which right now is the conduit that goes through the dam. You're going to want to try and control that to keep it as close to what you've had historically, because right now that's been close to that 100-year mark. It's going to have to go up a little bit, but enough that you would want to look at the downstream impacts. We certainly don't want to put something into place that's going to cause more substantial flooding issues downstream, but at the same time, we'll have to look at what those impacts are. Are we talking about is getting that to a certain size? Are we concerned about is there one home that may potentially already kind of be flirting with being in the floodplain, or are we talking about it's 30 houses? If it's 30 houses, we need to back up and take a look at what else needs to be done to do some improvements. And really honestly, part of it might be that when we're doing that, if we're seeing those kind of problems, we might need to have a conversation with the Natural Resource Conservation Service and say, are there improvements that need to be done to that channel downstream that could maybe be done as a federal project, where you could get funding through their organization to come through and resize some of those channels or do some things that might help increase the amount of water that it can pass, keeping everything within the stream banks. So that's all. It's part of what we would look at.
Well, we
don't want to cause more problems.
Right, we don't want to fix one problem but create another
You just
problem.
don't want to get your feet wet.
Well, well, we want to make sure we're keeping the people safe, but we
Right.
don't want to cause a problem to the residents downstream. The next question that I've got is you've given us an original timeline, and I think my understanding is there has been another timeline negotiated, and my question is this: based on the information that you've gotten and the reports, are you satisfied that that timeline is suitable as far as MDEQ and the Dam Safety Division goes?
So let's see. So we had discussion about when we sent out the original order. And of course, DEQ had some dates in there. We talked about those during the meeting. Since that time, really the only communication we've had on this has been that Rob on January 4th sent me a text that had some of the proposed dates of looking at. Let's see. There was have a meeting with that Mississippi Engineering would meet with MDEQ by January 14th to set the probable maximum flood parameters that Pickering would identify and subcontract team members for the failure mode analysis by January 31st, and that would be conducted by March 15th, and then there would be a report in by April 30th. The things that were addressed in there weren't necessarily, they didn't correspond with what was in the order. Because what we had in the order was that we were asking for a schedule for doing that maximum flood and the failure mode analysis. We asked for a schedule of just when would that get done by December 31st. We had in there about getting the Geotech report by December 31st, which we got from Burns Schooley Dennis. And that one thing that we figured at the time of our discussion would definitely have to be changed was that we would be asking for the application and design plans for repair by February 28th. What we got on January 4th didn't even discuss the design plans because that was a little bit out. And so really the things about how the PMF and the dates that were given to us in January 4th like I said, didn't correspond with necessarily what was in the order. It's not a bad thing, but I knew that we were coming here today and we'd have the opportunity to just, put that out and say, okay, and for your knowledge, Rob, I have held the order, so we've got it. We just haven't fully executed because we knew we were getting in this discussion about these. So it's, we'll go through and have these revisions done. Of course, like I said, the geotech was done. This discussion about whether or not that failure mode analysis needs to happen, I think again that comes back to how's the county going to handle the request for qualifications and who you're going to contract to do the design work.
So would we need to put that request for qualifications for design work out? Is that what we would need to do? And then based off of that, we would know if we had to do the failure mode analysis or not?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then, of course, with that you'd have, I guess, and that is unless your original RFQ asked for qualifications in regards to design work. I don't know if it did. I didn't see your request that went out. If it did, you'd be covered. If not, then you would need to put that out. I know it's kind of a state requirement for, whether it's a state agency or the county or any municipalities. Well, municipalities I think might be a little different, but I know the counties following that engineering services deal where you got to do that.
Would you
Request
have
for
something, this is all new, would you have some type of guidelines to go by when we put that out? So we understand, I know we talked about even when we met with you about how we picked the firms and those types of things, so Do you have a guideline for us to go by?
Not necessarily a guideline, but I might have an example of
Okay.
something that we've used, DEQ, and we've done an engineering service statement, just something that says, hey, yeah, here's some of the things that we'd like to see. And, I can get that to you. Like I said, it'll be strictly kind of a generic, or not necessarily generic, but it would just be a kind of a draft of something that we've.
Would we not lean on Pickering to sort of help lead us through this process? I mean, based on firms that they've worked with doing this type of work, would that be another option to?
It's really honestly probably not appropriate for me to tell you whether or not that's okay or not. I mean, that comes down to whatever your general agreement is with Pickering and others about how they, whatever guidance they're, you know, if you brought them on as kind of like a general contractor and you're asking them how some of this needs to be done, and they're in that role where they're advising you, then certainly could be, but.
So they would be subcontracting with somebody that has design technology to do this. Somebody that, I mean, that's what you're saying is, I mean, they said they had designed.
Yeah.
They said that wasn't what they normally design. So, but they said they could help us in that. So it'd be more like a manager or overseer of the project instead of dealing directly with whoever's doing the design.
I mean, even if they're subbing it, if it wasn't in Pickering's contract to do the design work, then the county is still in position that you've got to do the RFQ, because you got to make sure at some point that the services that they're performing were covered under your request that you put out. So if it wasn't done the initial one, county is probably going to need to get it, or you're going to need to get one that goes out and get that done. Just kind of dot the I and cross the T.
Sounds like we're gonna have to do an RFQ regardless. If the next step in that's whether or not we use Pickering or not for that dynamic.
And with that, I mean, you know, Pickering would be able to say, here's what, we've already got, we've worked and done some of this already. But it would just be, have it in that say, something says, yeah, look, here's what we're doing. Here's our point of contact's gonna be this. The structure of how that relationship's gonna work, it would be written out, and then here's how much we project the design plans are gonna, the whole process is gonna be with kind of a not to exceed value.
And that's what they did with the other. They said Burns Cooley Dealers is going to do the but it was all under one contract.
Right.
But they were subbing all this out. Okay.
Yeah, so very similar setup.
For an attorney to start thinking out loud is never a good thing, so bear with me. Here's the spot I think the county finds itself in. If we do an RFQ and get design work outside of the current contract that we have with Pickering, we're probably gonna be left to our own demise when it comes to the work that's already been done. If we use Pickering and we go within that current contract, there's a possibility that the work that's already been done can be used.
I think the work that's been done is gonna be used regardless. It's just a matter of
That's what you
how
answered the
much
question I
needs
was
to
trying to
be
get to. Okay, thank you.
redone on that.
I was trying to make certain that I'm not double.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make and ensure that we're not wasting money on the same.
And speaking of that, do you have guidelines on like what these should normally cost, like, or even maybe what it's costing at the reservoir now, so we would have an idea for budgeting what we should be spending? Would you have anything like that you could supply to us?
Yeah, I've got some projections. I can give you on some of those. We've got things historically that are kind of reasonable, not necessarily on the design, but say like things like inspections, the hydraulic analysis, and this discussion about the potential failure modes. Their PFMA right now, or that failure mode analysis, again, it's the reservoir. They've got 6 gates. It's a very big mechanical structure. that number is 115,000, but but again, that's a very complex structure. It's not something that.
So
that would
115,000
very well.
for the reservoir for the
That's
hydraulic
that.
study.
That's
So
no.
ours
That's
should
the,
be significantly.
That's the failure mode analysis.
failure mode
evaluation.
analysis, okay.
So yeah, their hydraulic evaluations. They've got that all factored in. Something different that all their hydraulic evaluations was about 25 for their aspect of going through and doing the
25,000 is all it cost?
for the that's what they had in it's there's right now.
But I think it's gonna sort of depend on the
Yeah.
design and, you know, you just.
Oh yeah. I mean that's a massive
Yeah.
watershed that extends all the way to
You can't just-
Louisville, and it's a very big it's a
So hydraulic is at 25,000 for the reservoir, is what you're saying?
that's
Or around that price?
with what we're doing right now. Yes.
And failure mode is at 115? Around there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
But like I said again, that failure mode analysis, it's something that would certainly be scaled far down to match up with this. And then I said, if as part of the design work, if there was an evaluation of the failure modes and we didn't do it as a formal, and just to explain to everybody, this potential failure mode analysis, we're actually doing this next week for the one for Ross Barnett Reservoir. We're going to have close to 40 people in the room, everything from past employees of the water supply district to operators for the gates, past engineers. Burns Cooley Dennis is going to be part of the group. Eddie Templeton with them, he'll be there. Anybody with DEQ that's historically had any involvement with Ross Barnett Reservoir. Any of the engineers that have ever been involved, we're all going to be together in a room, and for 3 days we're going through all the historical data that shows where there's ever been any seepage issues, looking at the gate structures, how often those have been maintained, are there concerns about the way those gates are set up. And we're going to be for 3 days straight with lots of coffee. It's going to be people sitting there looking at pictures and going through every evaluation that's ever been done for that dam. And then we'd have a final wrap up that says, look, based on all the known, like there really is a set process for how these things are addressed. You break it out, and from the national database of all the ways that dams have ever been fined or have ever failed in the country, you go through and you look at each one of those categories and you assign a probability that could actually happen at that structure. And again, with the complexity of Ross Barnett as compared to this project, there's a lot more things that can go wrong. So it's a much more involved thing. With this being what it is, we could scale some of that back and say, look, we already know that 2/3 of these failure mechanisms aren't even present here, and so that cuts this list down, and it could just be, really honestly, it could wind up being the firm sitting down with the EQ, and we sit down and we hash that out, and we work through kind of an abridged version, and that it's not a full-blown formal failure mode analysis. But we go through and we make sure we check all the boxes, and we do a write-up of what we determined during that breakdown, and that could all be part of something that gets incorporated in the design. But again, it just comes down to level of experience, and if that's something that I'm sorry, I'm at a loss for words now. I've been talking a lot. It's gone through.
One last thing is just to clarify on the dates. We're good with everything that you initially sent with us, and if there needs to be any modification on the dates, you'll tell us directly?
Correct, and we're gonna hold on that for right now, because like I said, need the county to figure out how you're gonna do, and if you're doing the RFQ, set up the timelines, and you can communicate via email or whatever, tell me what your dates are on the timeline for that.
It's not if we do it RFQ, it's
Excuse
when.
me,
when we
when
do
you
RFQ.
do your RFQ.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so when
And
you do
I-
your RFQ, give me the dates of like
Yes, sir.
when you would expect to get,
Should we-
you know,
we
gotta do it
packages
today.
and those things.
We gotta do it.
Well, the reason we have to do an RFQ is that's part of the requirement MDEQ is gonna have for us, because we should have done this already. That a fair
Well,
assessment.
it's not so much what DEQ has, I mean,
Well,
there's.
it's what we
there's-
should do in general.
it's-
Let me back up.
Right, yeah, it's the, yeah, county requirements under, you know, state guidance.
Can you
of
get
what-
that to us so we can go ahead and look at that and get that done by maybe next meeting, or the next meeting? Would you get us the sample?
Sure.
So we can get that distributed to all the supervisors, please.
And should this board, just to back up about the downstream, channel, should this board be looking for information, data on what's gonna happen downstream? I mean, because, number one, if one big tree falls across the channel and blocks everything, you know, it's gonna affect back upstream.
That will, and honestly, as much as I hate to say it, that's gonna be a separate issue from the dam, if something like that was to happen. Cause at any time, anything could fall into place that blocks that up. We had an example 2 weeks ago, we had a semi-trailer that went off and landed completely perpendicular across a stream in Stone County and blocked off flow and backed up water and started causing issues upstream. You know, that's just kind of one of those act of God type things that isn't necessarily taken into account about the dam operation. Now, as far as looking at what the impacts are of the stream, and what any changes would be, that's all gonna get worked into the design.
Okay.
Like, that's all gonna be a part of that evaluation. Cause we have information on what the downstream channel looks like. There's been LiDAR flown of that, so, I think everybody probably knows LiDAR now after we've had discussions about what Mississippi State did, for the basin. So, yeah, we've got that all, for all the downstream areas, and, that's all, available to, look at as part of this, you know, evaluation with any changes that go in, so. And before I leave you, one last note, I know, Ms. Miller shared with me about the North Pond, or the North Lake, I shouldn't call it a pond if it's 40+ acres, but, you know, about the, I'm actually gonna go there after this meeting and look at it in person and do an inspection on it. But need to look at what actually led to the release of the water. Was it just corrosion of the pipe and the water entered and everything drained out? Or was it a concerns about what happened around the pipe? But either way, it's gonna require to have plans sent in that say, here's how that's gonna be repaired before something
You
gets
mean
done.
the north?
The North Lake.
Well, I
yeah.
can tell you the outlet is completely rusted out.
It is completely
No
rusted.
control valve, seized up.
Yeah.
and,
Was
you know,
that corrugated metal pipe that runs under
Yeah.
the road?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so all that's gonna wind up having to be replaced.
Yeah.
Okay.
And is that something you will guide us through? So maybe we can fix that. We've got to replace that bridge. It'd be nice to, if we're gonna have to cut the road to do everything at one time. Is that something that you'll send us what we need to do in a letter?
I mean, I'll send you notices
The
that we need to get the
specifications.
plans for how you want to address that. And then as far as stacking it out, you can address, you know, the repairs whenever it's appropriate for the county to do that, so.
Any other questions for Mr. McCutcheon? We sure appreciate your time.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Sit tight and questions come up later.
I saw Mr. Carl Ray come in with Pickering.
Okay. Mr. Ray, we'll circle back around to you if you have anything you want to say.
I was glad to be here and I'm listening and, go ahead with the program. I'll talk to you a little later on.
Okay.
Okay, hang on.
All right. Mr. Seals, Tabal County Lake.
I'll have to get my lovely assistant to help
All right.
me get up there, but I can get up there. Not gonna be
Appreciate
as
you
quick
coming.
as Sprite, some of these other people.
Well, I would say that 2 years ago when you came and visited us with us, you were in much better
Just sitting
condition.
on
You
the
were
side. Well, I appreciate it. It's
actually
it's
in
good
a
to be out of
chair
that
then.
wheelchair. but it's even better to get up every day.
I got it.
You good? Yeah.
Thank you. Honey, I got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You keep that with me. Okay. Look, I want to thank y'all for giving me an opportunity to say a few things about the dam. I think y'all all know that I've had ever since I moved here to the county, very stern interest in the dam. I had actually prepared some comments, but after hearing some of the stuff that was said in here this morning, I think I'm gonna just kind of almost totally throw this away, okay? It was very concerning to hear the remarks that maybe, see, the BCD report in paragraph 5.3 clearly and just clearly states the dam is considered safe in terms of under seepage and through seepage. That's a hell of a statement, okay? And later, or in paragraph 5.1, we've heard people talking here about bad soil. That dam's got bad soil. No, it doesn't. And they explain those slides, and they explain how easily those slides can be taken care of, properly, okay? Properly taken care of. Okay, so now the question would come up. Well, did they give any thought to that before they put it in the report? I can assure you that Burns Cooley Dennis doesn't put a report out if they don't put thought on it. And we've got the Pickering group back here that could verify this. And I have no way of knowing that what I'm getting ready to tell you is facts, but I've never seen a job like this that it wasn't done. Burns Cooley Dennis had to turn that report in for review. And they probably let 5 or 6 of their employees review it. Every word. The dam is safe for through and under seepage. Major failure modes in dams, okay? A geotechnical firm and a firm overseeing the geotechnical firm would not put that in a report if they didn't believe it. Okay, so now and it's so good to hear your attorney today talk about maybe stop paying, double paying for studies, okay? So, and the Mississippi Engineering Group took 15 newborns. From those 15 newborns, they were able to get a very well-written and determination geotechnical report, okay, from those 15 borns. Yes, they made some comments that most of the dam was hard and stiff, and they were talking about other places that it was softer, okay? But if you noticed in the analysis, those softer areas never led to a failure. And I wouldn't expect any of y'all here at this table to be able to look at those stability analysis. And I am a geotechnical engineer, okay? And I can look at those stability analysis. And what those stability analysis tell you is that the dam doesn't meet criteria. Doesn't mean it's not safe. Now, before I hear, well, wait a minute, there was factors of safety on the lakeside less than 1. Oh, they were. And have y'all seen some failures over there on that side? Yeah, you have. And what those are not dam failures, okay? They're maintenance. So that's what the lakeside looked like. And that little bitty crack is what happened back in 16, where y'all came in there and replaced that slope and reinforced that slope, okay? So keep in mind, the Mississippi Engineering Group took 15 borns. Well, guess what y'all were sitting on? Y'all were sitting on 7 borns that was taken by the county in 2016 and 8 borns that was taken in 2020. 8 and 7, 15. So y'all had 15 additional borns you could have supplied this group. Would it have changed their opinion? Probably not. Probably not a bit. But I've never been on an engineering project in my life where I looked down and said, man, I wish I had less data to look at, okay? And as a taxpayer, I paid for those. It's just appalling, okay? Another item that I came across in y'all's files was a set of the the plans and specifications for the lakeside fix, for the 800 feet. The plans appeared very good, okay? But I would imagine the Pickering Group would love to have a copy of those. And maybe y'all could get somebody to furnish them a copy of those plans. That will show them, they weren't as-built, but it was how y'all proposed to fix the dam, okay? Maybe some issues with
Say
that
that
fix.
again. Say that one more time.
All right, the plans were how y'all proposed to fix the dam. In a real engineering job, you'll put out a set of plans, you'll get a contractor, they'll go out there and start building it, and any changes, they mark up, and then after the job, you get an as-built to show you how I built it. I say how you wanted me to build it, here's how I built it, okay? So, for the boring information in that document to be taken out of context, I've got a few soft zones. There's probably nowhere in the world you can build something to everywhere it's just gonna be stiff and hard, okay? So you know that in here, and probably why those zones were soft, they were probably laminated in some silts, they probably had some trapped water contents in them, and what's soft in a boring and an analysis, when you put it out there in the field and you load it up with a load on it, it doesn't act soft, okay? And if you notice back to those analyses, right in the area to where I believe that y'all had been told there were voids, that's right in the area that they ended up running their analysis. Didn't find anything, okay? So we shouldn't take their real report and take it out of concepts, okay, of what's meant.
Well, and let's not take that statement out of context either. They didn't bore in the exact same place. It was further, so you can't 100% say that.
Now, do you know that for a fact?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do, based on what they told us.
How did they know where
on the
those borings
dimensions.
were?
Because they were marked. They were marked. So,
Okay.
so just, I'm listening to you, but,
Okay.
you know, we
Please let
wanna
me
make this
continue, okay?
Blake.
Please let me go. There's no job in the world, and nobody, not even the federal government, has enough money. Because if you took those borings and you started spacing them out on 200-foot levels, you could always sit back and say, well, what's midway between? Well, okay, let's put one there. Well, what's midway between? Well, what's midway between? And you can midway between it. Geotechnical engineers and years of experience know how to interpret between borings, okay? Do they make errors? No, they can make an error. But I'll guarantee you, if an engineering firm sends me a report and it states it is considered safe for through seepage and under seepage, a major failure mode for that dam, they firmly believe that it's safe. All right, speaking of double payment, okay, and Mr. McCurchie touched on this today. He may have had a date incorrect, but in May of 2020, this county had paid for, and y'all sent him a watershed analysis report. Well, that watershed hadn't changed, basically. I mean, you could say, well, somebody built a house, and technically it changed a little bit, but the numbers hadn't changed. What should have happened, if somebody was sitting on the data, if somebody was managing the data on the thing, is that report should have been furnished to them. Do you agree with this report, or do you want to tweak this report? Tell me. You don't have to tell me it's right. If you look at it and say, oh, wait, they used a 2 and it should have been a 3. Well, I mean, an engineer has a right to change that. But why hold that data back? Why not allow this firm to have every piece of information they could possibly have? Y'all could do a much better job managing your data. And maybe sometime when y'all are out riding around the county in your county vehicles, burning county gas, you can sit there and ponder, how could we manage this data better?
He had to get that one in there, didn't he?
And, well, I have to pay a fortune for gasoline, okay? I wish I had a county card. But I do appreciate your sense of humor with that too, okay? One of the things, you know, that's kind of scary, because y'all sit around in here and y'all listen to some things that is said that, in my opinion, is to fire the people up. Okay, this is the small crack on the lakeside. Okay, and here's a photograph. I said, y'all got tons of photographs in your files. Did y'all furnish Pickering any of these photographs to look at? Yeah. Oh, you did? Oh, you don't know? Okay. Well, anyway, I remember sitting in this room and listening to somebody say, well, you know, there's some dirt out here along the toe of that rock. It may be moving again. How do we know it's not moving again? Well, because if you look at this construction photograph, it was constructed like that. Okay. They kind of trenched it in, did a toe trench along the rock and put it there. So you could take a photograph, and I probably got one somewhere, that where you look at and it says, oh, there may be a slide here. You know, the world's ending. The world's ending.
Mr. Steele, can I please interject for just a second? I think you're going back in the past now. We've actually moved on from that. We've hired a capable firm to come in and analyze what we've got out there. On a 5-0 vote, we said that we were going to go based on their analysis and their recommendation. So I think you're starting to go back, and I think you're probably making a few statements pertaining to Clyde Pritchard and his engineering firm. But I think we've moved on past what you're going back now telling us in hindsight.
Well, let me make
we've got a very capable firm.
Oh, I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that.
So I think we're past where you're going now.
Okay.
Yeah,
But let me make a comment to your comment. Okay. What scares me is when I heard Ms. Miller trying to do a lead-in to this report. You call that statement a spin, like it wasn't factual.
I didn't say spin. I didn't say.
Well, whatever word. I mean, we could go back and look at the video.
You're not going to argue, because we put out an RFP for anybody who wanted to bid on giving us recommendations on the county lake. So now, for you to come here, and we've got very capable firm here, and you have taken us back in time on what we should have. We've moved forward from that.
Well, I'm glad we have, because we don't need people in here putting spin on actual facts. Now, I'd like to make a comment about the probable failure mode. And I may have misunderstood Mr. McCurchie on this, but it almost sounded like he was going to do one after the plans were made on the construction. It just so happened that while I was employed with the Corps of Engineers, I wrote the first toolbox for the Corps to do a probable failure mode analysis. They liked it so much, they gave me money and a team, an international team, and we put together a much bigger toolbox to do it. And before I retired and left there, we made a correction to that version of it. So I happen to know a lot about probable failure mode analysis. And so what's going to happen is that you've looked at the soil and you've looked at the pit piping and seepage and through seepage. So somebody's going to sit around, a bunch of guys like they talked about are going to sit there and they're going to scratch their head and they're going to say, how could this thing fail? My crystal ball at the end of spending whatever money you spend, they're going to come up with the most probable failure mode is that drainage structure, the main structure. The reason is, now I sent y'all a set of plans that I think the dam was built by. But just having that set of plans doesn't mean that's the way they really built it.
I think Supervisor Williams is trying to say something.
I don't know if he's talking.
Excuse me, this is Supervisor Williams. I don't understand the purpose of Mr. Steele's report. We are moving forward. We don't even have a recommendation for improvement yet. So until that recommendation for improvement, Mr. Steele's report will come in, it seems to me, on a public hearing or something of that nature. We're trying to see now how we can move the process forward. And I think we got a good process moving forward. We're looking for recommendation for improvement. We're looking for a design, design of the dam, and that is forthcoming. But I don't see how it's gonna be forthcoming if we keep backing up.
I think,
So I'd like to see the board move forward with the reports that have already been done, coming from Mississippi Engineering Group. We do need to decide on who we should be paying. We got several individuals that are sending in invoice. Does those invoices go through Mississippi Engineering Group, or do they go individually to each one of those intermediate groups? And who is managing this whole process? There, so I think we got something that is forthcoming. I think we're progressing forward, but please let us continue on with the progress that we are making.
yeah.
As a matter of fact, we didn't
Thank you, Judge. Thank you,
take
Supervisor
a
Williams.
motion
Appreciate that.
to acknowledge the report from our engineering group. Now, I think we need to back up and go ahead and take that motion to acknowledge that report.
Can I make just a quick closing statement?
Yes, sir. And I just want to, as being here on the board for multiple years now, we do have citizens that come forward, sometimes in groups and sometimes individual that are really interested in projects. And we do certainly appreciate your interest and know, because of your background in dam safety and that you've moved here. We know that you worked on the Hoover Dam, the largest earthen dam in California. We know that you were 30 years with the Corps of Engineers. So I don't want you to think that we don't appreciate you coming forward, because we actually asked you 2 years ago to come forward and speak to us on this. And so we actually enticed you, we invited you to come after you came to the public hearing and ask about these very reports. So I just want to say thank you.
You asked him, not we, you.
Okay. In the closing statement, I wasn't, if y'all misunderstood what I was saying that you ought to do something with the Pickering Group. My comment about the failure mode analysis, at the end of the day, when you pay whatever you're gonna pay, they're gonna come up with the drainage structure is number one, and the spillway is number two, because it's not big enough, and we all know that, okay? And they're gonna say you're gonna have to increase the spillway, and you're gonna have to replace the drainage structure.
Thank you, Mr.
And y'all are quite welcome.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I'd like to make another comment, please.
Yes, sir.
The comment was made in one of those sections, 5.1,
Thank you.
that the dam was completely, the core of the dam was completely safe. But there was a statement made too, that in that same report, that they can determine the quality of the soil that produced the embankment, as if the soil that produced the embankment was the same as the surrounding soil in the area. I don't know whether anyone else interprets that or not, but the soil was the same, as if there were not any soil hauled in, a material hauled in to make the embankment. So with my thinking in regards to that, how can the Corps be completely safe if the existing soil in the area was used to produce the embankment, produce the core?
Mr. McKercher has a response to your question. Mr. Williams, he's going to stand up.
Okay, and if he's finished with the question. Speaking of that, so the material that was used in the core, it's got a lot of silver. It's a highly prevalent material that exists here in Oktibbeha County, sits on top of the chalk formation. And what happens
I can't hear.
We're going to have him walk
He's
forward.
coming forward, Supervisor Williams.
Okay, so just clarification. The material that's that was utilized primarily for the core of the dam in Oktibbeha County, on top of the Selma Chalk Formation, there's a silty clay that sits on top, and that was basically pulled out of what's now the lake bed and used to construct the core of the dam. In the report where you see the discussions about it being weathered, what that means is when that soil is exposed at the surface, it goes through these shrink swell cycles because of the amount of moisture it's exposed to, the amount of sunlight it's exposed to, causes it to crack, and then at times it just goes through, we call it a shrink swell cycle. And that process, as it shrinks down and then expands, it goes back and forth, it goes through this weathering process that kind of degrades the integrity of that material. So what you have in the core that's been packed away, I'm putting this in as simple terms as I can come up with. When it's packed away internally on the inside of that dam, it hasn't gone through that cycle. Your moisture contents have been far more consistent, hasn't been exposed to different events that would cause it to go through that weathering cycle. So what's on the outside of the dam on the back slope has gone through that cycle, and as they said, you know, you've seen degradation in probably the upper 5 to 10 feet of those slopes. That material can go through a process where in any construction you can go through, you can rework that material, recompact it, and help offset some of that damage. It all comes down to, in the end, ultimately on any dam structure, whether it's high hazard, low hazard, your uncle's farm pond, that outside layer of material, you want that to be something that's more of a topsoil that would allow for a healthy turf to be established on, a good grass cover, something that can be mowed, maintained. And what happens is when you have that organic type topsoil, it can absorb that water, and it can allow that to flow through. It allows plant uptake, it allows all these different cycles, and it can withstand that weathering. You don't get the degradation of that material at the surface because it's a different type of soil. The silty clays just can't hold up to that. So I don't want that to necessarily be a concern for you on the report, because what you see there is consistent with what we see on 99.9% of the dams across the state, because not everybody has that really good topsoil cover that you're supposed to have for that vegetation. So it's not an uncommon thing. We see that very commonly, and it's been an issue that's been noted on this dam for more than 20 years. I mean, it's something from the original construction, even going back to the Corps of Engineers report that they did in 1979 or whenever that was done. It was something that they noted in 81. Thank you. So it's been there. It's been noted forever, and that entire process of cutting the back slope and getting material placed on there to get that slope out to a good grade so that the county has a way to go through and maintain that structure, or something that you can actually cut, that should all be addressed during that process. So right now, core, what you've got per the report, looks very good. And that back slope certainly needs to be reworked, but that's not anything we didn't necessarily know going into.
I do have one question about that core, and I know there's been drillings and the material based on the analysis is good, but the actual installation of that core, was it keyed in, or is it just sitting on top of the rock base? Was it actually cut and keyed in?
I'll have to go back and look at the as-builts that we have on that, but I think the original design, it was supposed to key down into that Selma chalk. And whether or not that was actually done, I think it'd be, I just need to confirm.
Okay, okay.
I think it was, but I'll look at it.
Okay, good deal.
Any other questions from the board members?
Yes.
Did you? Yes, sir.
Couple statements.
Yes, sir.
Supervisor Williams, this is Mr. Carl Ray from Pickering Engineering.
I just want to clarify a little bit about the engineering firms. The Mississippi Engineering Group was formed about 25 years ago between Wagner Engineering, a large company in Mississippi employing over 150 people, and Carl Ray Furr and Pickering and Engineering Associates at that time before I sold to Pickering. And we have put that firm together, which now has over 400 engineers, scientists, and people involved with us. We do this on complex and large projects. For instance, Haley Barber hired our firm, Mississippi Engineering Group, to handle Katrina for all water, wastewater, and storm drainage projects after the Katrina disaster. We did that through DEQ. DEQ actually hired us, and we worked with Governor Barker to take care of that. And at present, Pickering itself is handling a $150 million project for the Ross Barnett Reservoir. We're going to take the traffic off the top of the dam. That's been becoming a problem. Over 33,000 vehicles a day going across that dam. So they have employed us, and we were able to get a grant from the Federal Transportation for start the environmental and for the design of this new roadway beneath the dam. So that's a huge major project that we're doing. Also, we work very closely with the Mobile Corps engineers, Vicksburg Corps engineers over the years, Pickering has. We're right now working on 2 major lakes, George County and Smith County. We're working on those lakes and dams through Mobile Corps of Engineers. So we're highly qualified to do what we're doing. I just wanted to let you know that the Mississippi Engineering Group is Wagner and Pickering, 50-50.
Question. So what I'm hearing and what I've heard, and I don't know, I know you
And I'm
got
the
to
chairman of the Mississippi Engineering Group.
Yeah. So the design that we're needing, you're confident that you can take this geo
We're very
information
capable.
and
Right.
put it into a design
Right.
that
Yes,
will.
sir. The Mississippi Engineering Group, if we need to, can hire an expert, subcontract to an expert, if we need it. And that's the way we handle a lot of projects like that together. If we have to have an expert, we can bring them on board.
And to Mr. Seal's point, we're not going to need any more new information. We can use the information in this geo study and the past information.
I told our group, and I'll tell Mr. McCutcheon, we're not going to formalize and final the report unless they agree with it. We're going to make sure DEQ is on board with the report before we make it public. We're also going to bring it up here in the next few weeks to visit with each supervisor and let them see before they have to look at it. Just throw something at you, you have to vote on it. We don't want that. But we're very careful of handling the future. And we also want to bring up the Poorhouse Road project while I'm here, Madam President. Talked to Dr. Keenum, and he's back on board. We want to go back to Federal Highway and try to get that project 100% federal money. And we'll need to be going to Washington to talk to those folks about March. I think probably the applications will be due in May, and we'll put that back on the agenda and see if we can get that one. I like it because it's classified rural and be 100% money.
You got the group that can get the money now.
Yes, sir. I got the group that can get the money, and we'll do that.
Could you give us cost analysis on this? We've just got open invoices, per hour.
You wanted more detail, we could do that.
Yes, sir. We want to know moving forward too, so we can put a budget together.
Sure, we can do it.
What it's going to cost. We heard some numbers from what the hydraulic study cost for Ross Barnett, which was $25,000. And we're seeing these bills that are significant. So we just need to know where we are on what projects these are tied to.
We'll do it and clarify it a little bit better so you'll know what we're spending.
And what to budget.
Yes,
we need to know moving forward what it's going to cost the taxpayers.
Yes, I was telling the president, I spent 20 years as county engineer for Lincoln County before I retired down there. So I'm very familiar with working with supervisors and MDOT and state aid.
Thank you so
Mr.
much.
Ray, thank you so much. We appreciate you. Yes, sir. Good
Mr.
stuff.
Montgomery, could I clarify something? If y'all heard me say that I didn't think they needed additional
Supervisor
warrants,
Williams.
I didn't mean that.
Supervisor Williams is wanting to make a comment. Can we just move on?
With Pickering and Poorhouse Road, are we in a new contract with Pickering on Poorhouse Road? And if so, what is the balance on the old contract
We've got a bill.
that we failed to get?
I don't know that we have a new contract. I know that that's for that raise grant. I do know this past summer that I sent letters of support in for that. And we have a bill here for $14,647.50 for Poorhouse Road. It says it's for environmental study. So I'm not.
Yeah, that is for the raise grant. Are we through with this year's raise grant that we did not receive it? And what is the balance that we owe for the work that has already been done? And will we be entering into a new contract if Pickering don't go back with additional compensation?
I'm not aware that we're under a new contract. I know this is the third year. I'll be glad I can ask that. Mr. Furr?
Yes, ma'am.
Supervisor Williams would like to know, are we under contract for Poorhouse Road? If we are, we see that we have a bill here for environmental study for $14,647.50. Is there a new contract? Do we still owe on something? Is there a new contract or?
That's the original contract for the environmental.
Okay, and that was from 3 years ago?
2 years ago, we finished it up now.
Okay, and so there's no additional cost that you know of?
Ma'am?
There's no additional cost moving forward that you know of?
The budget is the budget.
Okay. Could you hear that, Supervisor Williams?
Repeat that, please.
That was the original cost for the original study that had to be done, environmental study for the RAISE grant. So there's no additional cost. That bill's from 3 years ago. But
This
there's
is
no
an
additional
old-
cost at this point.
That's an old bill?
That's what he just said.
I do have a question. Where this coming from, this payment?
I don't know that.
I mean, is it coming from if it's on Poorhouse Road, I'm just
Well-
asking the question.
Well,
I think it was something we approved 3 years ago. I don't know.
we don't. Are we entering into a new contract on the raise grant? We've been trying to get this grant now for 3 years and have not been successful.
This
So
was,
how long are we gonna be trying that or look into something that is more feasible that we might be able to be successful with?
yes, sir. I'm gonna call Mr. Furr to come back up and let him address your questions on that. The question, Mr. Furr, was we are now in the third year and have not been successful in getting the federal grant. As you know, we're fixing to move forward with some state money and Oktibbeha County money and state aid money to resurface Poorhouse Road. His question is there something more feasible moving forward? Do you think that there's a possibility for us to get this? I think it started off as a Tiger grant maybe when we started 3 years ago. Is that what it was, or?
It's, we tried twice.
Okay,
Only twice, Mr. Williams, and this one will be the third.
okay.
Let me give you, it's got 17 million for Long Beach, Mississippi, on a raised grant, our firm did. Out of 38 Mississippi, there were only 2, Mega Everest Boulevard in Jackson and Long Beach that we did. And we got, like I said, we got 16 million. Took us 3 years, 3 times to get it. I think next time we'll be okay. I think we'll get it. If not, we'll be looking for alternate ways of doing that. I've talked with Dr. Keenum. In fact, I'm leaving here and going to see him about his 4-lane in Hale State Boulevard. I want to 4-lane it down, and then the road, the Poorhouse Road, the work you're going to do on the existing lane, we want to keep that lane in place and just build an additional lane probably to the north of the existing lane, the 4-lane, and then from 25 all the way to Starkville, to the stadium, we'll have a 4-lane drive. Also, we were putting in another little project there that Dr. Keenum wanted to take care of that problem right there where that Shell gas station is at that roundabout.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. They put that roundabout in.
It's
years
not
ago.
good. So we're gonna come across, he wants to bring the Tiger grant we got from Mississippi State 2 years ago, we had to do that twice. But when it's gonna come across, we're gonna pave it this year, come across, gonna bring it all the way across to Hale State Boulevard.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
I got
Thank
you.
you.
All right, yes, sir.
If it pleases the board, on that invoice, we can go back and pull what we've had in the past. I believe there's been a couple before, but I think
Well,
it would be good for us to be educated. I'm not aware either. I don't know myself.
Well, and that's what got me off the professional service from August 1st, 2021 to November 27th, 2021. So I thought this is a new.
I don't know. I know during that time, I was contacted and did, just like Supervisor Williams was talking about the grant, down close to the road off of 25 that he was talking about. I got several letters but I went and did that from local people in support of the federal grant.
Before we get too far, I'd like to make a motion to acknowledge the report.
Absolutely.
That came from our engineering firm and MDEQ.
Second.
Okay. Motion made by Supervisor Howard, second by Supervisor Montgomery. All in favor?
All right.
Motion passes 5-0.
We got you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move forward to Chancery Clerk business. Ms. Livingston?
I have nothing at this time.
All right, County Administrator?
You have the payroll changes in your package for approval.
I move we approve payroll.
Second, I would like to, I guess, go maybe to executive session a little later on and just ask our county, our road manager a question too, but I'll second that.
Okay, for a motion by Supervisor Howard, second by Supervisor Montgomery. We do have a note to go into executive session, just discuss one payroll change. I think we've all received a call about maybe.
Yeah.
All in favor? Motion passes. Supervisor Williams?
He said aye.
Let Supervisor know, I appreciate that, thank you.
5-0.
I've been fighting, yes.
Okay.
The next invoices from Pickering and Engineering Group, would there be any, do we need any additional details on that?
I motion we pay the bill.
Second.
All right, motion by Supervisor Trainer, second by Supervisor Howard. All in favor?
But I do have a question on that again, and that's, where is that coming from?
We could use that for your money if that's what we need to do.
Madam President, last board meeting, this is the county administrator's portion of the.
Yeah,
You do
I think it came out of, it's not the first time we paid them, so where did it come from last time? Just general county funds?
John, I'll check that. I think we paid 2 other invoices before. I'd have to check.
I was just wanting to know, because I know that's always a question in my area.
I'll let you know.
So you talking about the Poorhouse Road project, we were already on the contract for their services.
Yeah, but they had said that there would be no expenses on our end. I remember when they first came that all we would have to do is show support. So I was just making sure.
So we both pay the bills.
I just want to know where it's paid from.
We got a motion by Supervisor Trainer, second by Supervisor Howard. All in favor?
Next, you have 3 invoices from Mississippi Engineering for the County Lake Dam. And these invoices are actually past due. I went back and researched it. Our contract is actually signed with Mississippi Engineering, and Mississippi Engineering are the ones that invoiced us. So I just need you all to give me all.
I make a motion for approval.
Second.
Motion by Supervisor Montgomery, second by Supervisor Trainer.
With the caveat that we get more detailed to make certain that we comply with audit.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes, certainly. Thank you.
And we had a second from
Trainer. Motion by Supervisor Montgomery, second by Trainer. All in favor? Supervisor Williams? 5-0.
Okay, just a couple of reminders. On January 24th at 10 o'clock, we'll be meeting again with Toby to go over the redistricting. We need to finalize that because we need to let the election department know.
10 a.m. Toby here.
24.
Yes.
Next Monday, right?
24th at 10.
Yeah, good.
And also, the ribbon cutting for the Blackjack Road project is set for February 4th at 2 p.m. that's all I have. Don't forget Sean needs to.
Yes, okay. We've got a grant approval from the sheriff's department. We're gonna let them,
I just need to get approval to apply for the highway safety grant, seatbelt, and DUI.
So moved.
Second.
motion by Supervisor Montgomery, second by Supervisor Howard, to approve the seatbelt and highway safety grant. All in favor? Passes 5-0. Okay. Yes, sir, we got you. County business?
All right, the only thing I've got, and it's kind of a continuation of what we talked about last meeting, the road that extends out in the neighborhood of Colonial Hills,
Colonial Arms,
or whatever the name of it, at the end of South Montgomery on the left. Yeah. When I looked at the plat that we've accepted shows that it goes all the way to the end. The road itself goes all the way to the end of their plat, which is that road where, basically where they're stating it goes. I'm, just for updating purposes, I'm gonna ask Toby to double check that from his standpoint. What that amounts to is about 25 or 35 feet that we need to start dealing with and maintaining, that we honestly have never maintained. This has nothing to do with this board has ever had anything to do with. This has to do with from way back when. But I'm not asking for us to do anything quite yet, but I did want to update you that there's a high probability that we're gonna have to maintain it to the end of that plat because that's what we accepted.
Okay.
Did you have a chance to check on the table too? You know, we rescinded that vote after we had some discussion about that last week.
I think that took care of itself.
Oh, we did? Okay.
I think it did.
I think it did too, but
Okay.
we'll talk about it more.
Okay, all right.
That's fine.
All right.
To that point, Mr. Baggett, what are you gonna need to do to go in there, and have you seen that area that he's talking about?
Oh,
In Columbia?
we've done up to that point. It's not gonna take a lot.
Mini excavator, some,
Yeah, many estimators, small buildings,
I got you.
some sub-base material.
Okay.
It's not gonna take much.
Good deal.
County business supervisors. Do you wanna go around the table or?
I'll make a motion, we go into executive session over multiple personnel matters.
Motion made by.
Second.
Are we gonna come back for county business supervisor?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
I think we can handle it without going to executive session myself.
I'd rather not.
Well, one personnel matter that I think need to be in executive session.
I mean, we can, but I'd rather not.
Motion made, is there a second?
Yeah, I second it. Yeah.
Supervisor Howard, second. All in favor?
Opposed.
4-1. We're gonna go into executive session. We'll be back, after the county business.
I think we have some equipment that you all do not have, and I think you all may be able to assist us on some projects, and we can work with you all on some projects. And I would just like to ask you all to allow your road manager, Mr. Hal Baggett, to come up and to get with our road manager and see if we can work out some kind of agreement where we can do an interlocal agreement and work on some projects. I think we have something that can benefit you. We do have zipper machines, and I think Mr. Baggett wants to maybe zip up some DBST roads, and we need some labor to help to do some things, and if we can work out some agreements, and I think if counties work together with the price that these contractors are charging now, we can help each other save a little bit of money. And that's what I just wanted to come to ask for you to allow your road manager to come up and to meet with our road manager, and they work out some kind of plan which would be win-win for everyone, and see if we could work out some kind of interlocal agreement where we can help each other.
Somebody make a motion to acknowledge the request?
Motion.
Supervisor Trainer?
Yeah. I did have a question with you. So when you say you're zipping up the road, how big is your road zipper?
The zipper is about 4 feet wide, We do have 2 of them. You could probably zip up a little over half a mile per day, because with 4 feet, and if you got a 8, 12, 16, 8, you know, you have to go down through it, 20, you have to go however many times, but at least with 1 zipper, you could do over half a mile or more.
With one of them.
With one, and we do have 2, so you could probably get a mile per day zipped up. And this here be on some of your DBST roads. If you got some bad ones, you could use the machine to zip them up. And we was talking about some methods that we use that you all are not familiar with, of how we take this. And I don't know if you all do anything with the fly ash, but we build our edges up. We take the fly ash, put it in, then we zip the road first, build the sides up, put the fly ash down, and then we take these machines and zip the fly ash back up in the soil. It's better than scarifying it. Zip it back up in the soil, and then we water it down and run that chute foot and those packers over, and they give you a base that's rock solid. So those are some of the things that we were talking about with Mr. Baggett, and some other stuff that you all could help us with.
What would you, I guess I would like to know the question, what would you want from us?
What it is, we do have our chip sealer, but we are very short in manpower.
Okay.
And we would like to fix it if we can exchange some, just for some of your manpower to come up and run our equipment and do some reseal on our roads for us.
Okay. So do we need to just get with you, Mr. Baggett, on some roads that may need zipping up in our districts?
What we're gonna do is, I was gonna meet with Mr. Winters, Mr. Brooks, and we were gonna see if this would work. If we could come up with a plan that would be acceptable to the board and that was feasible relative to both road departments. And we were gonna bring it back to the board.
Could you pass that, who is your county attorney there?
Gary Cornerton. Yeah, you all would have to draw up the interlocal agreement.
And you understand this just can't impact negatively Oktibbeha County.
Yes.
You know, we don't want the citizens of Oktibbeha County saying, well, you're sending your road department to Chickasaw County and our roads are in terrible shape.
Yeah.
So,
But when you let them know that Chickasaw is going to come down to help you zip up some of those old bad roads that are in bad shape, we provide you with some equipment that you don't have now, and we're just swapping out apples for apples. And I think your citizens, once these machines go in there on those old roads with those potholes in them, and zip them up and get them back up to par, I think they would appreciate what has been done.
perfect. Thank you.
And you can send the manpower too to zip it up.
Well, we will work with that, and our road manager will come also to make sure that everything is done properly.
Because
Yes.
we're kind of short on manpower
Yeah.
as well.
Well, we're gonna work it out with Mr. Baggett, and those two, they'll get together and work it out where we'll be even with it, where no one will be getting over on another person like you just stated. Everybody, it'll be a win-win for everyone.
And we're not saying that this will work. We're saying we
We're
would
just-
like an opportunity to look
We're
at
just
it.
gonna see, yeah.
That's right, and see if we could come up with something.
We've got a motion to acknowledge the request. We got a second by Supervisor Montgomery. All in favor? 5-0. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you
Yeah,
coming.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Good to meet you.
Okay, is
Thank
there
y'all.
anything?
Yes, sir.
Supervisor Howard? Did you have anything else?
Yes. I've been in contact with Alderman Perkins on Garrett Road, the portion after you cross Highway 25 going west to the city limit lines. I've been in communication with him, and the Board of Aldermen should be sending a board request to you, Dolores, on the details of partnering to resurface that road. So we'll be looking at they'll send some specifications on redoing that road, and that's where I need our engineer to take a look at their specifications. But you should be receiving a board order laying out the details so we can partner on resurfacing that road.
And that's West Reed, isn't it, really?
Well, it's Garrett out to the city limits, then it turns to West Reed.
Are they gonna do Babylon and all that too?
No, we just
Just doing the
talked
main
about
drag.
doing that from Highway 25 to the city limit lines, to West Reed, where West Reed starts.
I got you.
Yeah, but it'll be a 50-50 deal.
Supervisor Montgomery?
Huh?
You have anything?
I'm good.
Okay. Anybody, anything else, Supervisor?
Yes.
No,
Yes,
man,
I
go
have
ahead, keep going.
Go ahead, Supervisor
Supervisor
Williams.
Mr. Williams, go ahead.
Williams. Am I?
You're up. Yes, sir.
Okay, Judge Carpenter purchased a property at 2186 Mount Olive Road, and he will have a covenant installed so he can get to that property and develop it.
Request by Supervisor Williams for a covered install on 2186 Mount Olive Road.
So moved. Second.
Trainer, and then Montgomery. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Okay. Next thing up is Travis Carpenter is moving very fast on the Bluff Lake Road grant, and remind you that that is a 100% grant that the county does not have to match any dollars. He's moving rapidly. I hope that we will also be just as attentive, and we'll work just as hard. Now, what he needs from us now is a letter of support from elected officials, and he would like to have one from Representative Rob Robinson, our board attorney, and Senator Williams. I think he's been in communication with Senator Williams also. So I'm asking Attorney Robinson, could you help us out with those letters of support?
Yes, sir.
He wants to be able to review those in terms of where we at. Sometime this week we want to review the process. So if you kind of stay in communication with me to let me know how far along are we with those letters of support. I'm working on some letters of support from some other individuals, like the churches out there, and maybe some of the citizens. But he would very much like letters of support from representatives and senators.
He'll get them.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you, Attorney Robinson.
Yes, sir.
I would like to back up. I would like one other thing. I don't know when this board is planning on getting together and identifying our funds and identifying projects, but I'm ready to go. I mean, this project I just talked about is one of my projects, but we need to move with our bond money so we can start identifying projects. So I don't know what's the date of the time.
What about the 24th? We're supposed to be here at 10 o'clock. Could we be here at 8 o'clock?
That'll work for me. Because I'm ready to
Y'all be
start
all right with
identifying projects and moving forward.
Because, yeah, we need to, time's coming.
Yeah. So the
you want to
24th
stand recess to the 24th at 8?
at 8 o'clock.
Yes, sir. You're
Yeah.
good with that. I'll make that
Yes,
motion.
if I can.
January 24th.
No,
If for some reason
It's
I
good,
can't.
I mean,
Have you got anything?
no, I got the 24th already blocked out.
I have just that morning at 10. I'm not sure if I have anything at 8, but if I do, you can lead it until I get here.
Yeah, I got it blocked out.
Okay, we're gonna recess. Is there anything else? I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, you
One
need.
more thing.
Okay.
I need a motion to create a county court with the this newly created county court deadline for people qualifying to be February 1st, according to the proclamation from the governor of the state of Mississippi.
So moved.
Today.
Second.
So moved.
Montgomery, motioned it. Supervisor Howard seconded it. All in favor?
Quick
Passes
question,
5-0.
Rob. When's that election gonna happen? Is it gonna be this November?
Yes.
They'll be
Yes.
elected this November. Okay.
And
The day of reckoning.
I guess we'll.
The only thing I ask is there's a subdivision that's starting off of behind Palace Drive off South Montgomery. And I wasn't aware that we had approved a subdivision back there. So the only thing I would ask is anything that we have approved, and of course they're tearing that road up, that we just, last term, just fixed. Another one, just like Silver Ridge with the logging.
Have you seen Silver Ridge lately?
It's terrible. So, that's the only thing is I would like to know, get the site development permit, a copy of that if we could. So,
Palace Drive.
it's behind Palace. It would've been something that went through Clyde's office.
Is that a form of a motion?
Yes, if
Second.
you don't mind.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. we will stand adjourned
Well,
until.
we need to take that,
All in favor?
Yeah.
We stand adjourned until the, oh, sorry, go ahead, one more
State
thing.
that motion one more time so I make sure she got it, because I missed it.
That we get a copy of the site, do y'all know of any site development permits that you have in your area? I was not aware that this one had been, done yet, and it's off of South Montgomery behind Palace. And, just wanna make a motion that we get a copy of that, and, because they're building a subdivision back there and they're, destroying the roads that we just fixed, so. It's in the back of Heritage Colony. I made the motion.
And I second.
Supervisor Howard seconded.
I'm sorry, thank you.
And all in favor was unanimous. Okay. We stand adjourned until, the 24th.
we need a motion.
I'll make that motion.
At 8 o'clock. Supervisor Montgomery made the motion. Supervisor Howard seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
5-0.
I'll try to bring
Thank you.
biscuits or something.
At 8 o'clock.
Miss Administrator, can you